Very excited to be joined this morning by a great longtime friend of the show, Matt Karp, who is with the Center for Working Class Politics and has some extraordinarily interesting new polling data to share with us. Matt, great to see you.
Good to see you, man.
Yeah, happy to be here, guys.
All right, so tell us what you are up to in the state of Pennsylvania in particular.
Yeah, so I mean, just zooming out nationally for a second first, Kamala Harris is struggling with working class voters, by the most sort of commonly available metric, voters who don't have college degrees. She's down 10, 11 points, double digits. In Pennsylvania specifically, she's down between 7 and as many as 18 points, a Times survey found last month. This is the constituency that she's most struggling to close the deal with. Biden, remember, lost this group only by 2 to 4 points in 2020. He made up some ground with working class voters, with voters without college degrees from Hillary in 2016. So Kamala has, drawn even with Trump in the polls, but she's still really behind with these working class voters. And so we ran a study in Pennsylvania, and it was a regular poll, and it showed, like every other poll, a neck and neck race there. It showed Kamala, and Trump close on with lots of demographic groups. But we ran something a little different alongside that poll. And we wanted to look at essentially the different kinds of messages that the Harris campaign is putting out alongside a couple other sort of hypothetical messages that the campaign could put out. So we ran messages on a sort of a moderate opportunity economy message that she's been, hitting a lot in her rhetoric. We ran a message focused on abortion and Roe v. Wade. We ran a message based on the sort of Trump as a threat to democracy, who's going to cancel the Constitution. We ran about 5 different sort of versions of Kamala messages, and then we ran 2 messages that we'd written that were not, maybe not the sort of Bernie Sanders message I would dream up, underneath my pillow every night. But they are stronger, tougher messages, talking about Washington as run by billionaires, about needing to stand up to the corporations and price gouging. Some things that she said, but a lot stronger in tone on the populist sample that we ran. And then we ran a more progressive economic message that married that populist tone to some policy hits like expanding Medicare, guaranteeing a job, ending offshoring, et cetera. Stuff that's in her ballpark, but a little bit more aggressive than what she's done. And the results showed that with Pennsylvania voters, and specifically with independent voters and with working class voters by a variety of measures, that the populist and the sort of economic focused message were the messages, the things she's not saying, essentially performed a lot stronger than the things she has been saying. And
while you're talking, Matt, let me go ahead and put those up on the screen while you continue to explain this, because I do think we have this chart that we can show of how the messaging performed vis-a-vis Trump.
Totally. Yeah, so I mean, this is just a crude graph. We're still waiting to get the final report together. That should come out very shortly. But essentially, you can see that this populist message, which, complain that billionaires are getting richer, we need to stand up to the big corporations and the politicians in Washington that serve them, that didn't really focus in the way that Democrats often do, just on essentially populism as a partisan issue. The Republicans and their rich friends, but actually sort of named the enemy as all big corporations and billionaires, and didn't put it in as just the billionaires on the other side, unlike our billionaires in parenthesis. And that message really outperformed every other one in the bag. The second strongest message was the one that said expand Medicare, add paid leave and affordable childcare, stop price gouging, stop offshoring. They kind of threw some sort of policy goodies in the works alongside some of the populism. And we were surprised to some extent, not only that it outperformed the sort of the democratic threat, democracy under siege, we need to save the Constitution message, but it also outperformed abortion, which, is conventionally understood as the Democrats' strongest playing card.
Well, let's go to the next one. Can we put the next graphic, please, up on the screen about the favorability rating? So you have there from the strong populist how it outperformed everything from even progressive economics, moderate economics, soft, etc. The Democratic threat message being the one that there's been a lot of Kamala messaging on, but you haven't even necessarily seen, you don't see it actually playing out. Even more interesting, you have it amongst independents. Can we put the next one, please, on the screen because that arguably could be the most important. And you saw the same thing here where the economics, strong populism message, both of those two were really important for independents as opposed to any of the other stuff that they were testing.
Yeah, this is favorability. So this is essentially like we just to clarify how the study worked. We didn't just sort of put the messages in front of our sample of voters as independent items. We actually put them in a head-to-head against under essentially Kamala. Under Kamala Harris's name, with Kamala Harris's characteristics, simulating a kind of ballot box scenario, and then we put Trump. We put the message against Trump, and we wrote a series of Trump messages, also like the Harris messages, drawn from his own rhetoric. And so we have not just how much do they like the message, which you saw there, and you could see that Pennsylvania voters, especially the independent voters, were drawn toward the populist and the progressive messages, but they actually outperformed the Trump messages. So with independents, the populism message beat the Trump message by 8 points. The abortion message only won by 3, and the democracy message lost by 1. That's with overall voters. With independents, which is a tougher crowd, the populist and progressive economic messages won by about 3. And the abortion and democracy messages actually lost to Trump messages by 6 and by 8 or 9 points. So with that real swing voter demographic, we saw significant splits, the difference between winning and losing.
Let's take a look also at G4. This is how blue collar voters respond to these various messages. Again, I mean, it's kind of a similar landscape, only here the strong populism comes first, but then the moderate economic message, the whole like opportunity economy framing, which I kind of hate, but they apparently like pretty well. The Let lands second, progressive economics land third. Put G5 on the screen also because this looks at non-college educated workers. So blue collar workers was the last one. These are workers who have high school degree or less. Strong populism wins, then progressive economics, then moderate economics. I have to tell you, Matt, like, the thing that makes me most skeptical of these results is just how closely it hews to my own like preferred view of the world. So I have to sort of check myself. And I have to go back and say, like, you know, when we were going into 2022 and I, like many others, thought there was going to be a red wave, it's because Democrats were not talking about any of this stuff at all. Like, at least Kamala has sometimes talked about price gouging. She is running ads saying that Trump is for the billionaires and I'm for you. In 2022, they really didn't do any of that. It was all democracy and abortion. And guess what? It worked pretty well. So, you know, is it possible that even though when you test these messages, like sort of the overall numbers are, yes, they favor the economic message, maybe the abortion message is super motivating for people to turn out. And even though it's not the preferred message over all of them, it's the one that is the most intensely felt among a key demographic group. Like, how else do we explain what happened in 2022 when there was basically no economic messaging and the state of the economy was significantly worse than it is right now at this point in time?
Yeah, what troubles me there, because I hear you, Krystal, and I feel the same way about like, wow, this is exactly what my prior said, that there must be something wrong with the survey. But look, what actually troubles me about the 2022 analogy is that this is a different electorate. I mean, you have the midterm turnout is 50%, or in a good year, like low 50s. I forget what it was in 2022, but it was, you know, between 50 and 55%. In a presidential year, the turnout is last time it was over 65%. Maybe it's going to drop this year. I mean, in some ways, Democrats may be hoping it does. But you have a broader electorate. You have a sort of a less reliably less motivated electorate in terms of hardcore partisans on both sides. And yeah, I think abortion and democracy do bring out the Democratic base. You saw, you know, looking into the weeds of our polls, you saw essentially with professional class voters, because we broke down the data not just by education levels, which is the most common proxy for class, and I'll defend that as a way of thinking about class crudely. But we also looked at occupation, and so yeah, you saw the blue collar numbers, and we could contrast that with professional class voters. That is voters in credentialed jobs. And professional class voters liked every message. They actually liked the populist messages too, but they liked the abortion democracy message. That was all between +4 and +7 points. They're all in for the Democrats no matter what. The question is, what about these disproportionately working class, lower propensity voters in places like Pennsylvania? What are they coming out to support or potentially not coming out to oppose, what's going to bring them out, what's going to motivate them or have them lean one direction or another. And yeah, we found, so again, with the blue collar group, that's defined by occupation. And it's one of the 2 working class groups we tested. We also tested sort of service clerical workers, which we consider broadly working class also. And that's the sort of essentially the Democratic working class and the Republican working class right now. The blue collar group, manual workers, they're plus 19 Trump. But even they were in positive territory on the populist message and close to positive on the progressive economic message. Whereas the democracy message, they were minus 14 or something. Jeez. So it's really, I really worry that she's preaching, when she's at these rallies in Erie, PA, and she's got Trump on the Jumbotron, and she's talking about how unacceptable he is and how he's going to cancel Roe v. Wade and oppose the Constitution. A large number of voters are eating that up enough to win in 2022. Maybe, look, it's all close. Maybe it's enough in 2024. Personally, I hope so. But I don't think this is the most effective way to win the swing voters, the working class voters right now in these swing states.
Well, you've got the data to back it up, and luckily we'll find out, right?
Matt, I wanted to ask you one more question because you mentioned something that I think is interesting. You made this distinction between like the Democratic working class and the Republican working class, because in addition to testing these messages, you did test these different class groups, and you got down to a much more granular level than I've seen in any other poll in terms of which class groups just based on income level are supporting which party and based on occupation, which was also super fascinating. Can you talk a little bit about that and some of the cleavages even within what we might define broadly as the working class?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, the phrase, the keyword for us is the Republican Party hasn't become the party of the working class. We talk about class de-alignment, not realignment. Of course, one might say as a sort of a left-leaning group, we fear realignment because the Republicans seem to be pushing that direction. But right now, the working class is really divided. It's not aligned with either party. And one cleavage, some of the cleavages are around, lines of gender, in some cases race. But, a really vivid cleavage is in occupational category. So blue collar, that is manual workers, truck drivers, manufacturers, generally, this is according to sociologists, people who work with their hands. They're Trump plus 19 in Pennsylvania right now in our sample. And they were in some ways the differences were most dramatic in terms of their enthusiasm, or at least their winnability, I would say, with the populist and with the economic messages. Whereas the service workers, that's another large portion of the working class. Actually, numerically, it's a bit larger, and it's not as dramatically pro-democratic as the blue collar workers. It's in our sample, it was Harris plus 6, but it's a broadly democratic leaning working class group. These are everything from clerical workers to cashiers to other sort of people who work in service occupations. Donald Trump, I guess, at the McDonald's, entered the Democratic working class there in PA. But yeah, this group was, they also really liked the populist and the progressive rhetoric. They were populism plus 12. They were also fine with abortion. That was a plus 8. This is a Democratic group. The democracy message left them pretty cold too, though. It was like plus 2. So I think even those voters, they're going to pull the lever for Kamala, a lot of them. But some of that enthusiasm we might see might be stronger for a more hard-hitting economic message. And I do hope that the campaign leans into that. I mean, there's some evidence that they're spending ad money in that direction. And I do think that the sort of going after Trump as a billionaire is still the sharpest tool on the table that Democrats have never actually picked up and wielded with all its power.
Yeah, well, potentially Elon Musk running around dangling $1 million checks, the richest man on the planet, could give them a potential opening if they choose to take it,
Yeah, geez.
Matt, tell people where they can find this survey research and also where they can follow your work.
So yeah, the survey drops this week. I think it should be today, and it's at the Center for Working Class Politics.org. It will also be featured at the Jacobin website. My work is at Jacobin. I'm writing a column for Harper's Magazine lately. So you can find me, and you can find me on Twitter too.
I didn't know that about Harper's.
Right. Congrats.
I have to update my reading list to include that. Great to see you, my friend. Thank you so much.
Good to see you.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.